The tension in First Capital Bank's marble lobby was electric. Thomas, the bank manager's voice dripped with condescension, deliberately loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. "Mr. Rayford, let me make this perfectly clear, since you seem to be having trouble understanding. The VIP service is for serious investors with verified wealth, not for people who are clearly out of their depth, and we already have a better worthy client for our Platinum Trust," he said, pointing to the middle-aged white man in the conference room. "I've been in banking for 20 years. I can spot a fraud the moment they walk through that door. Now pick that up and get out of my bank before I have security drag you out." Dominic Rayford, the black CEO, stood tall despite the humiliation, unflinching as he slowly reached into his briefcase. "This $50 million was going to be yours today." Dominic's voice carried through the hushed lobby, calm yet commanding. "Not anymore." The bank employees watched in stunned silence, their faces draining of color as he pulled out the check. They had just made the greatest mistake of their lives by underestimating the very one who could invest with the bank. If you believe no one should be underestimated, overlooked, or judged by their appearance, hit the subscribe now, type justice, and tell us what country you're watching from. Earlier that morning, sunrise broke over the city skyline, illuminating the ultra-modern glass mansion. This wasn't just any luxury home. This was the residence of Dominic Rayford, founder and CEO of Raytech Innovations, one of the fastest-growing tech companies in America. At 45, Dominic carried himself with the quiet confidence that came from building something from nothing. Dominic wasn't just wealthy, he was influential. His Ray Foundation had donated over $200 million to educational initiatives in underserved communities. 3 governors had appointed him to economic advisory boards. The president had consulted him on technology policy the previous year. When Dominic Rayford spoke, people listened. His smartphone chimed with a calendar reminder. That day wasn't just any day. That day, Dominic was finalizing a $50 million investment with First Capital Bank, one of the oldest and most prestigious financial institutions in the city. This wasn't merely a transaction, it was a strategic partnership that would fund his company's ambitious expansion into renewable energy technology. "The Platinum Investment Trust paperwork looks good, Mr. Rayford," said his chief financial advisor, appearing in the doorway. "All pre-approvals came through yesterday. The bank seemed very eager to close this deal." Dominic nodded, picking up the investment portfolio from his nightstand. He flipped through the documents one more time. 50 pages of financial projections, risk assessments, and legal agreements. Everything was in order. The $50 million was a significant sum, even for someone of his wealth, but the potential returns made it worthwhile. His mind drifted back to the virtual meeting with First Capital's investment team the previous week. Their faces on the video call had been all smiles and excitement when they realized who was interested in their Platinum Trust. "Mr. Rayford, securing an investor of your caliber would be an honor for First Capital," the bank's senior vice president had gushed. "We'll roll out the red carpet treatment. Our executive suite will be prepared for your arrival." His assistant Sarah entered, tablet in hand. "Your 10 a.m. appointment at First Capital is confirmed. They sent over another email this morning." She turned the screen toward him, showing the message with its effusive language. "We're thrilled to welcome you to finalize your investment. Our senior team will be waiting to provide our signature VIP experience." Dominic smiled slightly. "Thanks, Sarah. What's my schedule after the bank?" "Lunch with the mayor at 12:30, then your keynote at the tech summit at 3. The governor mentioned he might stop by for that." Dominic nodded, making his decision. He reached past the custom suits, selecting dark jeans, a crisp button-down shirt, and a casual blazer. Expensive, but understated. He wasn't trying to impress anyone that day. "Will you be taking the Bentley, sir?" Sarah asked, already reaching for the keys to his custom British luxury car. "No," Dominic decided. "The Tesla will be fine today." This detail mattered. Dominic could have arrived in any of his luxury vehicles, the limited edition McLaren, the custom Bentley, or the vintage Aston Martin. Instead, he chose the everyday Tesla Model S, still a $100,000 vehicle, but practically modest compared to his other options. That day wasn't about flaunting wealth, It was about making a sound business decision. Dominic drove himself downtown, no chauffeur that day. The sleek Tesla glided into First Capital Bank's parking structure at precisely 9:45 a.m. Dominic had always been punctual. 15 minutes early was on time in his book. He checked his appearance in the rearview mirror, straightened his blazer, and grabbed his handcrafted leather briefcase containing the documentation and the $50 million cashier's check. First Capital Bank's headquarters dominated the financial district, 30 floors of gleaming glass and steel with the company's logo illuminated at the top. Dominic entered through the revolving door. He approached the reception desk confidently. The young woman looked up with a practiced smile that immediately faltered as her eyes took him in. There was a subtle shift in her expression. A momentary confusion, perhaps even disappointment at seeing a black man, but quickly masked by professional courtesy. "Good morning," Dominic said warmly. "Dominic Rayford. I have a 10 a.m. appointment with the investment team regarding the Platinum Trust." The receptionist's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Her fingers hovered over her keyboard, but she didn't type anything. "Do you have confirmation of that appointment?" she asked, her tone suggesting skepticism. Dominic maintained his pleasant expression, though he noted she hadn't asked that of the 3 white clients who'd checked in before him. He pulled out his phone, showing her the email confirmation from the bank's senior vice president. "I see," she said, her tone shifting to one reserved when to be lost or confused. "Well, Mr. Rayford, all of our investment advisors are currently with clients. Please have a seat in the waiting area. Someone will be with you when they become available." No offer of coffee. No call to alert the investment team of his arrival. No acknowledgement of the significance of his appointment. Dominic took a seat in the waiting area, his face revealing nothing of his thoughts. But he observed everything, the subtle shift in atmosphere that his presence had created. A security guard casually repositioned himself closer to where Dominic sat. 2 bank employees behind their desk whispered to each other, glancing in his direction when they thought he wasn't looking. He'd seen this before, too many times to count. The minutes ticked by. 10 minutes. 20 minutes. Dominic watched as other clients who arrived after him were promptly greeted and escorted to meeting rooms. He noticed their handshakes seemed warmer, their welcomes more genuine. 9:45 became 10. His appointment time arrived and passed. 10:15. Still waiting. 10:30. Not even an update from the receptionist. Have you ever been made to feel like you don't belong somewhere, despite having every right to be there? Share your experience in the comments below and hit the subscribe button for more stories like this. The bank's atmosphere was busy but controlled. Employees moved with practiced efficiency. Clients came and went. And still, Dominic waited, the $50 million cashier's check sitting quietly in his briefcase. At 10:35, Dominic approached the desk again. His demeanor remained professional, but there was a firmness to his voice now. "Excuse me," he said. "My appointment was scheduled for 10. It's now 10:35. Is there a problem I should be aware of?" The receptionist barely looked up from her computer screen. "Our investment advisors are unexpectedly tied up this morning with priority clients," she said, the emphasis on priority slight but unmistakable. "If you'd like to reschedule for another day." From the corner of his eye, Dominic noticed a young Latino banker at a nearby desk watching the interaction with visible discomfort. Their eyes met briefly, the younger man's gaze communicating an unspoken apology before he quickly looked away, clearly troubled by what he was witnessing, but unsure how to intervene. Dominic was considering his response when the bank's glass doors swung open dramatically. A white man in his 50s strode in wearing a flashy designer suit that somehow managed to look both expensive and tacky. His gold watch glinted ostentatiously in the lobby lights, his shoes gleamed with fresh polish, and his silver hair was slicked back in a style that screamed, "Look at me." Everything about him demanded attention, and got it. The transformation in the receptionist was immediate and dramatic. She stood up, her face brightening with a genuine smile. "Mr. Whitman, how wonderful to see you today," she exclaimed with enthusiasm she never showed Dominic. Charles Whitman didn't even pause at the reception desk. He simply waved his hand dismissively as he walked past. "Amanda, darling," he called back. "Tell Thomas I'm here about that investment opportunity we discussed. The platinum one." Without an appointment, without verification, without waiting. Within 30 seconds, Dominic timed it on his watch. The bank manager emerged from a hallway. Thomas Bedford, according to the nameplate on his lapel, was a middle-aged white man with the confident stride of someone used to authority. His hand was already extended enthusiastically toward Charles before he was even halfway across the lobby. "Charles, always a pleasure," Thomas exclaimed loudly enough for the entire lobby to hear. "We've been expecting you. Let's get you set up in our executive conference room right away." As Thomas led Charles away, neither man acknowledged Dominic's presence. The receptionist was already preparing a tray with coffee and pastries to bring to the conference room. A door opened to a part of the bank Dominic hadn't been allowed to see, revealing plush furnishings and artwork in what was clearly the VIP area. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. Dominic, with his confirmed appointment and $50 million investment, had been waiting for nearly an hour. Charles Whitman walked in without an appointment and was immediately escorted to the executive suite. The young Latino banker rose from his desk, approaching the reception desk. He spoke quietly to the receptionist while glancing in Dominic's direction. Though Dominic couldn't hear the conversation, the body language told the story. The young man suggesting something, the receptionist firmly shaking her head. Dominic sat back down, pulling out his phone. He reviewed the email chain that had led to this appointment. Dozens of messages over the past month. The bank's eagerness to secure his $50 million investment had been unmistakable in their written communication. "We would be honored to handle your investment," the senior VP had written. "You'll receive our VIP treatment every step of the way. Your business means everything to us." Yet there he sat, invisible, unimportant, unwelcome. Through the glass walls of the executive conference room, Dominic could see Charles Whitman making himself comfortable, accepting a cup of coffee, laughing loudly at something Thomas said. The doors opened briefly as the receptionist delivered the refreshments, and Dominic caught snippets of Charles's booming voice. "Of course I can match their investment level. Whatever that other fellow was offering, I can do better. Let's talk numbers." The doors closed again, but the message was clear. Charles Whitman was being treated as the VIP that Dominic was promised he would be. After another 10 minutes, Thomas emerged from the conference room and finally approached Dominic, a folder in hand. His expression was one of polite dismissal. "Mr. Rayford, is it?" he asked, his tone making it clear he knew exactly who Dominic was, but was deliberately mispronouncing his name. "I understand you're interested in one of our investment packages." Before Dominic could respond, Thomas continued, glancing back toward the conference room where Charles sat. "I should inform you that we're already in discussions about this particular opportunity with another investor. Perhaps investments with smaller minimums would be more appropriate for your situation?" The implication was clear. Thomas had made assumptions about Dominic's financial capacity based solely on his appearance. Dominic stood, maintaining perfect composure. He'd faced this kind of prejudice before, though rarely so blatantly in a professional setting. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding," Dominic said calmly. "I already filed my application for the Platinum Investment Trust. I have an appointment confirmed by your senior vice president. I'm here to finalize the $50 million investment we discussed extensively last week." Thomas's eyebrows raised slightly, disbelief evident on his face. He opened the folder he was holding, revealing Dominic's application with all its details, including the investment amount. "Yes, well about that." Thomas's voice trailed off as Charles Whitman emerged from the conference room, approaching them with the swagger of someone used to getting his way. "Thomas," Charles called out. "Who's this you're talking to? I thought we were finalizing our deal? You said I was your priority this morning." Thomas turned toward Charles, his entire demeanor changing. His posture straightened, his expression became deferential. "Just wrapping up here, Charles. I'll be right with you." Charles looked Dominic up and down, making no attempt to hide his disdain. "Is this the other investor you mentioned? Come now, surely you're not keeping me waiting for this consultation?" The way he said consultation made it clear he didn't view Dominic as competition for the investment opportunity. Thomas laughed uncomfortably. Of course not, Charles. As I was explaining to Mr. Rayford, Mr. Whitman has expressed interest in this particular investment opportunity, he explained, turning back to Dominic. We'll be proceeding with him instead. Then came the moment that would change everything. Thomas deliberately took Dominic's application, the one that had been pre-approved, the one that had been welcomed with virtual open arms just days earlier, and tore it in half, right before Dominic's eyes. Your services won't be needed today, Thomas said coldly. Perhaps try the community bank down the street. They handle smaller accounts. The torn application now rested in Thomas's hands, a physical representation of the disrespect Dominic had just experienced. In that moment, as Thomas stood there holding the torn papers, employees around the lobby froze, watching the scene unfold. The young Latino banker looked horrified. The receptionist suddenly seemed uncertain, but no one intervened, no one spoke up. Around the bank, customers and employees had fallen silent, sensing the tension in the air. All eyes were on Dominic, waiting for his reaction. Charles Whitman stood smugly beside Thomas, both men clearly expecting Dominic to simply walk away defeated. But Dominic Rayford didn't become one of the most successful entrepreneurs in America by walking away from obstacles. And what no one in that bank lobby realized yet was that they've just made a $50 million mistake. If you were in Dominic's shoes, what would you have done? Share your thoughts in the comments and click on the subscribe button now to not miss out on what's coming next. Dominic Rayford remained standing in the lobby, but honored. But his mind was calculating, assessing, planning his next move with the strategic precision that had built his billion-dollar empire. Before Dominic could respond, Charles Whitman stepped forward again, inserting himself physically between Dominic and Thomas. Thomas, get this man out of here so we can continue our meeting, Charles demanded loudly, not even bothering to acknowledge Dominic or Sarah directly. I don't have all day, and I'm certainly not sharing my investment opportunity with him. We were in the middle of discussing my $1 million commitment. Thomas hesitated for the briefest moment, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features as he looked between the commanding presence of Charles and the calm dignity of Dominic. But his decision had already been made. With a short nod to a security guard who had been hovering nearby throughout the interaction, he made his choice clear. Please escort Mr. Rayford from the premises. Thomas instructed the guard. He is no longer welcome here today. The security guard, a middle-aged man named Robert according to his nameplate, approached with visible reluctance. He had worked at the bank for 12 years and had never been asked to remove a well-dressed, calm client who had done nothing disruptive. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the building, Robert said, his discomfort evident in his voice and posture. At Thomas's signal, a second security guard joined the first. Both men looked increasingly uncomfortable, but determined to do their jobs. The situation was escalating rapidly, with more customers pulling out phones, some appearing to record the confrontation. Charles stood smugly beside Thomas, arms crossed over his chest, a satisfied smile playing at the corners of his mouth as he watched the security guards approach Dominic. This is why I appreciate banking here, Thomas, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. You understand who the real clients are. As the security guards moved closer, Dominic remained completely calm. With the steady hands of someone who had faced discrimination many times before and had learned to use it as fuel rather than fire, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The movement was unhurried, deliberate, confident. With the entire bank lobby watching in tense silence, Dominic scrolled through his contacts and selected a name. He placed the phone to his ear. Sarah, he said when his executive assistant answered on the first ring. I need you to cancel the $5 billion investment deal with First Capital Bank immediately. The security guards hesitated, sharing an uncertain glance before looking to Thomas for guidance. Thomas himself seemed frozen in place, the torn application still in his hands as the gravity of the situation began to dawn on him. If this man truly was Dominic Rayford, if he truly was about to invest that much money. That's correct, Dominic continued. No, I haven't been offered coffee. No. I haven't been shown to the executive suite. In fact, the manager, Thomas Bedford, has just torn up my application in front of the entire lobby and is now having security remove me from the building. Yes, I'm quite serious. Thomas's face drained of color as the realization dawned that Dominic might actually be who he claimed to be, and that they were now about to miss the biggest investment ever, even far higher than Charles had brought. The torn application in his hands suddenly seemed to burn like a hot coal, evidence of a colossal misjudgment that could not be undone. The security guards took a step back, no longer advancing toward Dominic. Charles Whitman's smug expression faltered, uncertainty creeping into his features as he watched the demeanor of the bank staff transform in real time. The lobby remained in suspended animation, every person present witnessing what was rapidly becoming a pivotal moment for First Capital Bank. A moment when prejudice and presumption were about to exact a catastrophic cost. The security guards approached Dominic with visible hesitation, their training conflicting with their growing uncertainty. Robert, the older guard, kept glancing back at Thomas, as if seeking confirmation that they were really supposed to remove this calm, well-dressed man who was now speaking directly to the bank president. The younger guard, hand nervously resting on his radio, positioned himself to Dominic's left while keeping a respectful distance. "Sir, I need to ask you to end your call and come with us," Robert said, his voice lacking conviction. Dominic continued his conversation with Richard Barnes, explaining the situation with the measured precision of a man accustomed to high-stakes negotiations and directing Sarah, his assistant, to pass what happened to the board of the bank. Thomas Bedford, watching this unfold and realizing the potential catastrophe looming before him, strode forward with newfound urgency. His earlier smug confidence had evaporated, replaced by a desperate need to regain control of the situation. In a move that would later be described in multiple employee testimonials to the bank's ethics committee, Thomas reached out and attempted to physically take the phone from Dominic's hand. "Sir, I must insist, no phone calls are allowed in the banking area," Thomas declared loudly, his fingers actually making contact with Dominic's phone. "It's a security policy." This was, of course, completely false. Throughout the bank, other customers were freely using their phones for various purposes. The fabricated policy was a transparent attempt to cut off Dominic's communication with the bank president. Dominic smoothly pivoted away from Thomas's grasp, maintaining his calm demeanor even as the bank manager invaded his personal space. "Richard, it appears Mr. Bedford is now attempting to physically take my phone." "Yes, I believe that's him you can hear." From the private conference room, Charles Whitman watched the confrontation through the glass walls, a satisfied smile playing across his features. With theatrical flourish, he raised his china coffee cup in a mock toast toward Dominic, taking a slow sip while maintaining eye contact. It was the gesture of a man who believed he had won, who saw himself as untouchable. The tension in the bank lobby had reached a breaking point. Customers had stopped pretending to conduct their business and were openly watching the drama unfold. Some had their phones raised, recording the incident. Bank employees stood frozen at their stations, uncertain how to proceed, as their manager created an increasingly volatile situation. Just as Thomas made another grab for Dominic's phone and the security guards moved closer, the main doors to the bank burst open. Richard Barnes, president of First Capital Bank and member of the city's financial elite, rushed into the lobby with an expression of alarm. He was still wearing his overcoat, clearly having left another meeting in haste to address the situation personally. "Thomas, what in God's name is happening here?" Richard's authoritative voice cut through the tension like a knife. Thomas froze, his hand still outstretched toward Dominic's phone. The security guards immediately backed away. Charles Whitman's smug expression faltered as he lowered his coffee cup, suddenly alert to the changing dynamics. "Mr. Barnes, we were just handling a situation with an unverified individual who's disrupting," Thomas began, but Richard cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Dominic," Richard said, approaching with his hand extended. "I am profoundly sorry for whatever has happened here. I came as soon as I got the call from the board." The two men shook hands, the familiarity of their greeting making it immediately clear to everyone present that they knew each other well. Thomas's face drained of color as the full magnitude of his mistake became apparent. Before Richard could say more, James Rodriguez approached quickly, tablet in hand. His usual deference to authority was temporarily overshadowed by a sense of urgent purpose. "Mr. Barnes, you need to see this immediately," James said, offering the tablet to the bank president. "I've been trying to alert management about this situation all morning." Richard took the tablet, his brow furrowing as he reviewed whatever information James had presented. The bank president's expression transformed from confusion to shock to grim resolve in the span of seconds. "How long have you had this information, James?" Richard asked, his voice now deadly serious. 3 days, sir," James replied. "I filed the suspicious activity report on Monday when I noticed the pattern. I tried to bring it to Mr. Bedford's attention twice, but he told me to mind my own business." Richard's face hardened as he handed the tablet back to James. "Print this and have it ready for the authorities." As if on cue, the bank's doors opened again. 2 police officers entered, scanning the lobby with professional detachment. Thomas straightened his tie and moved toward them with a confidence that seemed increasingly misplaced. "Officers, thank you for responding so quickly," Thomas said. "We have an individual who needs to be—" "Detective Wilson, Fraud Division," Richard interrupted, addressing the senior officer directly. "Thank you for coming so promptly. The situation has developed beyond what Mr. Bedford described to you on the phone." The detective nodded professionally to Richard. "Mr. Barnes, what can you tell me about the situation?" What happened next would later be described by witnesses as the most dramatic plot twist I've ever seen outside of a movie. Richard Barnes, president of First Capital Bank, pointed not at Dominic Rayford, but directly at Charles Whitman, who remained in the conference room, now looking considerably less comfortable. "That man, Charles Whitman," Richard said firmly, "has been attempting to commit fraud against this institution. We have documentation of falsified financial statements, check kiting between accounts, and an attempt today to secure investment access to our Platinum Trust through misrepresentation of assets." The detective's expression remained professional, but his posture shifted immediately to alert. His partner moved subtly to position herself with a clear view of Charles. "Furthermore," Richard continued, "he has apparently convinced my bank manager to deny service to one of our most valued clients in order to pursue this fraudulent opportunity." He gestured respectfully toward Dominic. Charles Whitman, seeing the focus of attention shift dramatically to him, stood up abruptly in the conference room. His previously confident demeanor had vanished entirely, replaced by the nervous energy of someone calculating escape routes. As the officers moved toward the conference room, Charles pushed past a startled bank employee and made for a side exit. His escape attempt was short-lived. The second officer had anticipated this move and intercepted him before he reached the door. "Sir, please remain where you are," she said firmly, her hand moving to rest on her equipment belt. "We need to ask you some questions about your banking activities." Charles's desperate attempt to flee had only confirmed suspicions. As the officers escorted him back to the main lobby, his bluster collapsed entirely. "This is all a misunderstanding," Charles protested, his voice having lost its earlier commanding tone. "I'm a respected businessman in this community." Detective Wilson remained unmoved. "Sir, attempting to flee when officers approach generally doesn't support claims of innocence. We're going to need you to come with us to answer some questions about these financial discrepancies." As Charles was escorted toward the main doors, now flanked by both officers, Richard Barnes turned to Dominic. The bank president's expression carried genuine remorse as he extended his hand again. "Dominic, I cannot begin to apologize enough for what's happened here today. This is not how First Capital Bank treats its valued clients. Or any clients for that matter. I would like to personally oversee the completion of your investment in the Platinum Trust immediately." Thomas Bedford stood nearby, his face ashen as he watched his career imploding in real time. The torn application was still clutched in his hand, damning evidence of his catastrophic judgment. The lobby had gone completely silent, every eye focused on Dominic Rayford. After experiencing public humiliation and discrimination, how would this powerful man respond to the bank president's plea? Dominic reached into his briefcase and removed a document that made several bank employees gasp audibly. It was a cashier's check made out to First Capital Bank for exactly $50 million. The check that was supposed to have been handed over in the executive suite an hour earlier, accompanied by champagne and congratulations. "Richard," Dominic said calmly, "I came here today prepared to invest $50 million with your institution." Relief washed over Richard's face. But it was premature. With deliberate slowness that echoed Thomas's earlier action, Dominic Rayford tore the cashier's check for $50 million in half. The sound seemed to echo through the silent lobby, a physical manifestation of consequences. "You've shown me exactly what kind of institution this is," Dominic said, his voice carrying clearly to every corner of the bank. "My money will go elsewhere," and immediately he tore the check. The torn check, representing $50 million that would never flow into First Capital Bank's accounts, drifted from Dominic's fingers to the marble floor. No one moved to pick up the pieces. Sarah, who had also arrived and had been documenting the entire incident on her phone, stepped forward to join her boss. Together, they walked toward the exit, their dignity intact despite the morning's events. "Dominic, please," Richard called after him, desperation evident in his voice. "We can make this right. Thomas's actions don't represent our values." Dominic paused at the door, turning back to address not just Richard, but everyone in the bank. "Values aren't what you put in your mission statement, Richard. They're what you demonstrate when you think no one important is watching." With that, Dominic Rayford and Sarah exited First Capital Bank, leaving behind $50 million and a powerful lesson about judgment, prejudice, and consequences. 1 month after the incident, that would come to be known in financial circles simply as the Rayford rejection, the fallout continued to reverberate through the banking industry. The morning financial shows displayed the stark reality in red digits across their tickers. First Capital Bank's stock had plummeted a staggering 37% since the video went viral, erasing over $2 billion in market value in just 4 weeks. Financial analysts attribute the unprecedented decline to both the massive withdrawal of funds following the incident and the reputational damage inflicted by what many are calling the most expensive act of discrimination in banking history, declared the somber-voiced anchor on Financial Morning Report. The screen behind her showed the unmistakable downward trajectory of FCB's stock price, a near vertical drop with no signs of recovery. What Thomas Bedford couldn't have known that fateful morning was that Sarah, Dominic's executive assistant, had been recording the entire confrontation from the moment she entered the bank. The high-definition video, capturing every word, every dismissive gesture, and ultimately the tearing of both the application and the $50 million check, had been uploaded to social media platforms within hours of the incident. The footage had spread with the unstoppable force of a digital wildfire. Within 24 hours, it had been viewed over 20 million times. Within 3 days, it had become the centerpiece of national news broadcasts, morning shows, and late-night monologues. The hashtag banking while black had trended for 2 straight weeks. Corporate sponsors and major clients began distancing themselves from First Capital Bank almost immediately. Statements of "reviewing our banking relationships from major corporations" signaled the beginning of a mass exodus of institutional funds. High-net-worth individuals, concerned about both the ethical implications and the bank's plummeting stock value, transferred their accounts to competitors at an unprecedented rate. Meanwhile, across town, Metro United Bank was experiencing the opposite trajectory. Their stock had surged 22% in the same period, largely attributed to a single new client relationship. Dominic Rayford had not only transferred his personal and corporate banking to Metro United, but had made the $50 million investment with them instead. Metro United Bank is proud to announce the successful launch of our Sustainable Tech Investment Fund, made possible through our new partnership with Ray Tech Innovations. Their press release had stated, the investment had already yielded early returns that exceeded projections, creating a virtuous cycle of positive press for both the bank and Dominic's company. In a gleaming office tower downtown, the newest employee of Ray Tech Innovations was settling into his role. James Rodriguez, whose courage in showing Richard Barnes the evidence of Charles Whitman's fraudulent activities had helped resolve the situation, had resigned from First Capital Bank the very same day as the incident. "I couldn't continue working for an institution that would treat someone with such disrespect based solely on appearance," James had explained in his resignation letter, which had also found its way online. Dominic, recognizing the ethical backbone that had driven James's actions, had offered him a position leading Raytech's new financial partnerships division. The role came with a salary that tripled his bank compensation and equity options that could potentially make him a millionaire within 5 years. "Integrity isn't something you can teach," Dominic had told the business press when asked about the unusual hiring. "James showed the kind of character I want in my organization. He was willing to risk his job to do what was right, even when those in authority were trying to silence him." Across town, in a much less glamorous setting, Thomas Bedford sat in a plastic chair in a waiting room, nervously adjusting his tie before yet another job interview. The past month had been a cascading series of rejections. The viral video had made his face instantly recognizable in financial circles, and his name had become synonymous with costly discrimination. His termination from First Capital Bank had been announced in a terse press release just 48 hours after the incident. First Capital Bank has parted ways with Thomas Bedford, effective immediately. "This decision reflects our commitment to ensuring all clients receive respectful professional service regardless of appearance, race, or background." The statement had done little to stem the tide of account closures and stock devaluation. Thomas had applied for 17 positions at various financial institutions in the past month. 0 callbacks, 0 offers. His 20-year career in banking had effectively ended the moment he tore that application in half. In the county courthouse, Charles Whitman's legal troubles were mounting by the day. What had begun as an investigation into attempted fraud at First Capital Bank had expanded dramatically as forensic accountants began examining his financial activities. The charges now included check kiting, wire fraud, falsification of financial documents, and attempted theft by deception. The defendant established a pattern of fraudulent activity spanning at least 7 financial institutions, the prosecutor had stated at the preliminary hearing. Mr. Whitman created the illusion of wealth and used that illusion to attempt to gain access to investment opportunities and credit lines for which he was not qualified. Charles's attorney had tried unsuccessfully to have the charges reduced. "My client simply engaged in aspirational financial planning," the lawyer had argued, a statement that prompted audible scoffs from the courtroom gallery. The judge had been unmoved. "Aspirational financial planning does not include presenting falsified bank statements and attempting to secure $50 million investment opportunities through deception," she had replied, setting bail at an amount Charles predictably could not afford. While these individual stories played out, Dominic Rayford had channeled the experience into creating lasting change. Within 2 weeks of the incident, he had established a financial equality initiative, committing $10 million of his personal fortune to fund its activities. Discrimination in financial services isn't just morally wrong, it's economically destructive, Dominic had explained at the launch event. "Our initiative will conduct mystery shopper audits of banks, investment firms, and lending institutions to document and address disparities in treatment based on race, gender, age, or appearance." The initiative had already published its first report, revealing troubling patterns of differential treatment across multiple institutions. Major banks, eager to avoid becoming the next First Capital, had begun implementing new training programs and accountability measures almost immediately. 3 industry leaders had approached the Financial Equality Initiative about conducting voluntary audits of their practices, a development that financial analysts noted would have been unthinkable before the viral incident. Change was happening with unprecedented speed. 6 weeks after the original incident, an unusual group gathered in the lobby of First Capital Bank. Dominic Rayford stood at the center of a diverse collection of young entrepreneurs, recent graduates of his foundation's Business Incubator program. The 6 aspiring business owners represented the full spectrum of racial, ethnic, and gender diversity, each clutching business plans and financial projections. Richard Barnes, still bank president despite calls for his resignation, personally greeted the group in the lobby. His face showed the strain of the past 6 weeks, the stock collapse, the congressional inquiry, the mass exodus of clients. But there was also determination in his expression, the look of someone committed to fundamental change. "Mr. Rayford, thank you for giving us this opportunity," Richard said, extending his hand. "We're honored to host your entrepreneur mentorship group today." The bank looked noticeably different from Dominic's previous visit. The staff was more diverse. New signage emphasized the bank's commitment to equal service prominently displayed throughout the space. Even the security protocols had been visibly adjusted, with clear guidelines about when guards could and could not approach clients. Richard led the group on a tour of the bank's operations, explaining the changes implemented since the incident. "We've completely overhauled our client verification procedures," he explained. "Every customer receives the same verification process, regardless of appearance. No exceptions, no shortcuts." They passed through the same area where Dominic had waited that fateful day. Now, a digital queue system displayed waiting times transparently on monitors throughout the lobby. No more subjective decisions about who got seen first. "Our staff has undergone comprehensive bias training," Richard continued. "But more importantly, we've implemented measurable accountability metrics. If disparities in service appear in our data, it affects everything from performance reviews to bonus structures." As they reached the executive conference room, the same one where Charles Whitman had raised his mocking toast, Richard turned to Dominic with genuine emotion in his voice. "What happened to you in this bank was inexcusable," he said. "The changes we've made can't undo that harm. But I want you to know that your response, creating the Financial Equality Initiative rather than simply soon us into oblivion, has forced this institution to become better than it was. You could have destroyed us completely, and no one would have blamed you." Dominic considered this for a moment before responding. "Destruction is easy, Richard. Transformation is harder, but ultimately more valuable. What matters isn't that I was disrespected. What matters is ensuring it doesn't happen to the next person who walks through those doors looking like me, or like any of these young entrepreneurs." The group concluded their tour in the bank's community room, where loan officers would spend the afternoon reviewing the business plans of Dominic's mentees. Young entrepreneurs who might never have gained such access without his influence opening doors. As they prepared for these meetings, Dominic shared a final thought with the group, unaware that his words would later be engraved on a plaque in that very room. "Money talks, but character speaks volumes. True wealth isn't measured by what's in your account, but by who you're willing to value. In business, as in life, how you treat people when you think no one important is watching reveals everything about who you truly are." The young entrepreneurs nodded, absorbing the lesson that had cost First Capital Bank $50 million and counting to learn. The banking industry would never be quite the same, and neither would any of the lives touched by the ripples of that single moment of discrimination and its profound consequences. If this story resonated with you, hit the subscribe button and share with others so they can watch too. See you in our next video.